esports isn't just a fringe hobby anymore, right? I mean, it's this massive global economic force.
Oh, absolutely. A giant.
And if you're looking for, I guess, a strategic blueprint on how to conquer that landscape, you really have to look at G2 Esports.
You really do.
Here's an organization that started in Europe and somehow managed to orchestrate this global takeover. And they did it by targeting two of the world's most difficult and most lucrative markets at the same time.
Exactly. And what G2 has done is it's just a fascinating case study, not just for gaming, but really for any global business.
Right.
They looked at the USA and China, two economic titans with completely opposing rules of engagement, and they developed two unique strategies to tackle them.
And that's the core challenge we're diving into today. How do you maintain one single brand identity? That, the classic G2 style.
That's swagger.
That swagger, exactly, while running strategies that are fundamentally, contradictory across the Pacific. This deep dive is really your shortcut to understanding that playbook.
And I think the big lesson right from the jump is that successful global expansion is all about adaptation. For G2, trying a one-size-fits-all approach would have been just a spectacular instant failure in either the US or China.
It wouldn't have worked?
Not at all. Their strategy shows that success isn't just about winning games anymore, it's about winning markets. And to do that, you have to know their distinct cultural, regulatory, and competitive demands.
Okay, so let's start with the U.S. playbook.
Yeah.
This was G2's first major strategic pivot outside of its European comfort zone.
It was a big one.
Most European orgs, they try to just import their successful teams, their systems. G2 did the opposite. They decided North American rosters were the priority. So why? Why take that calculated risk of cutting a successful European team to start fresh with U.S. talent?
Well, it was a monumental decision, especially in a game like Valorant, where they were already pretty competitive in Europe.
Right.
But they looked at the U.S. not just as a place to, win tournaments, but as the biggest audience for content and for sponsorship dollars.
The money.
It's the money. And to access that, you need authenticity. So replacing a solid European Valorant team with an all-North American roster, that was G2 basically betting that local heroes drive local engagement much more than international star power ever could.
That sounds like a massive strategic cost, though.
Yeah.
You're risking your competitive performance, at least in the short term, for the promise of market access.
A huge risk.
So that immediate fan engagement spike we saw, was that actually sustainable, or was it just a temporary lift from, the novelty of it all?
That's where the long-term investment really proves it wasn't just novelty. The sustainability comes from their commitment to the franchise model in North America.
Okay, so like with Call of Duty.
Exactly. Look at their involvement with the Call of Duty League, investing in the Minnesota Rec KKR team. That's not building a team from scratch.
Yeah.
That's buying a permanent slot in a closed domestic league. That move signals a long-term commitment. It signals stability. And that appeals directly to U.S. sponsors and fans who, they value those established domestic leagues.
So the U.S. playbook has two main parts then. First, you leverage local players for immediate content and that fan connection.
Yep.
And second, you make these deep structural investments into the existing American esports infrastructure. But how do you maintain that famous kind of irreverent G2 swagger while adapting to U.S. culture?
That is the critical part. The G2 swagger is their brand identity. It's that mix of highly skilled play with this high-energy, almost tongue-in-cheek content creation. So in the U.S., their strategy has been to find North American players who just naturally fit that energetic, content-focused persona. The U.S. market loves personality. It loves a narrative.
Oh, for sure.
And G2 provides that. They do it through localized content, targeted merch releases, and just embracing the drama of direct, high-stakes competition with those established North American rivals. They are competing head-on for market share.
It's a full frontal assault on the North American market.
Oh, it really is.
Prioritizing direct competition, audience capture through personality. Okay, now hold that thought.
Yeah.
Because when you contrast that really aggressive approach with what G2 does in China, the difference is it's stark.
It's night and day. It really is. The moment G2 looks east, the entire playbook just flips on its head.
Because they're not building teams there.
No. In China, they are actively choosing not to build major domestic teams in the same way. And the reason is the market structure just doesn't allow for it, and the cost-benefit analysis completely shifts.
Okay, help us understand the environment there. Why is importing a roster or buying a franchise slot the exact U.S. strategy? Why is that suddenly not viable in China?
The Chinese esports scene is it's defined by two things. incredibly intense domestic competition and significant regulatory complexity.
Good Devon.
The government, yeah. To compete in major leagues like the League of Legends Pro League, the LPL, you need these deep local partnerships, and you have to comply with a lot of oversight.
Got it.
LPL teams, for instance, are highly established gatekeepers. So instead of trying to force their way into that fiercely protected ecosystem, G2 recognized that the goal couldn't be domestic competition. It had to be cultural outreach, soft power.
So if they're not competing directly, what does this subtle art of presence, as you called it, what does that actually look like? How do you build brand loyalty without a team to root for every weekend?
It's very sophisticated brand building. They bypass the need for a big, permanent Chinese roster by focusing heavily on localized content partnerships. They use Chinese social media platforms,
They're totally different.
completely different from Western ones, to connect directly with fans. This means tailoring their global content specifically for a Chinese audience, sometimes simplifying the message, adapting the tone, the humor to fit local preferences.
So we're talking about working with major Chinese streaming platforms, specific local influencers who already have this enormous reach.
Precisely. They're not trying to build from scratch. They're leveraging existing infrastructure and influence networks. And what's more, their strategy relies heavily on global tournaments.
Oh,
When
okay.
G2 performs well on the international stage, say, at the League of Legends World Championship, the Chinese audience for those events is huge. So G2 turns their global success into localized brand value in China. They become the exciting, successful foreign team that Chinese fans can support without ever having to challenge a domestic LPL favorite directly.
So it's an influence model, not a revenue by competition model.
That's the perfect way to put it.
That distinction is just. It's profound. Let's try to connect these two threads for you. In the U.S., they're playing for market share, for direct revenue, for local legitimacy through these permanent roster investments.
Boots on the ground.
And in China, they're playing for influence, brand love, and cultural resonance, all while avoiding that direct competitive slugfest.
And the synthesis of that is the big business lesson here. G2 has created this hybrid global operating model. They've kept the core brand ethos, that high-energy, confident G2 identity, but they've allowed for radical strategic adaptability. The idea that one size fits all fails isn't just a theory. G2 is proving that your operating model has to be dictated by the local environment.
They're basically two different companies, depending on which side of the Pacific you're on.
Exactly.
And managing two strategies that different must require incredibly consistent leadership and core values.
Right.
We've seen this tested before, right? With how they've handled player controversies very publicly and decisively.
Yes.
That consistency is arguably even more important when your brand spans such different cultural zones.
Absolutely. Global expansion just exponentially increases your brand risk. If you're operating with different standards in China versus the US, any inconsistency can be, weaponized against you.
That's a good point.
So G2's lesson is that while the playbook has to be locally smart, the foundational brand integrity and corporate values have to stay globally consistent and transparent. A scandal handled poorly in one region can instantly derail years of investment in another.
So the complexity isn't just about winning games. It's about navigating these complex legal and cultural minefields at the same time. Winning globally, like you said, means being smart locally.
Yeah, adapting the entire revenue and operational model to fit the terrain. The U.S. model is decentralized, content-driven. The Chinese model is highly centralized, regulated, and influence-driven.
And this leads to the ultimate strategic trade-off. In the U.S., G2 is aiming for direct, monetizable success through competition.
Right. They control their revenue streams more directly there.
But in China, they're focusing on top-of-funnel brand building. They're hoping that influence and soft power will eventually translate into long-term opportunities, like merchandising or IP leverage, rather than just league wins.
It's the difference between investing in a cash flow operation, that's the U.S., and investing in long-term brand equity, which is China.
It really makes you wonder which approach is the smarter long-term bet.
It does. I mean, G2's story teaches us they aren't just playing games. They're running a massive dual-market strategic experiment. They are testing two distinct paths to profitability in global entertainment.
And that's really the provocative thought we need to leave you with. The fact that G2 prioritizes direct competitive rosters and immediate money in the huge U.S. market while they opt for brand influence and cultural outreach over competition in the equally huge Chinese market. It forces a critical question. In the next decade of global esports and digital entertainment, which strategic model, the immediate direct competition model or the patient soft power influence model, which one will ultimately yield greater, more sustainable profit and global dominance?
It's a question of short-term control versus long-term market saturation. And G2 is running the test in real time, giving all of us a front row seat to see which strategy wins out.
Thank you for joining us as we unpack the strategic blueprint of G2 Esports. Their adaptability and their clarity of purpose, I think, provide insights that are relevant far beyond the world of gaming. We look forward to having you with us for the next deep dive.